His oath metal was gone. They had pried it from his chestplate with iron tongs, the ancient sigil of the Sundered Vow, forged from the same scale they had sworn to guard, and melted it in the public forge before the eyes of the Order. They called it justice. Sir Kaelen of the Northern Garrison had failed the vigil. 3 nights passed. The sealed vault beneath Veridain had trembled, not with the slow groan of old stone, but with a pulse, a heartbeat, and when the sentries reported a crack in the obsidian floor, hot amber light bleeding through like the eye of something waking, they needed someone to blame. He had not argued. What was there to say? The dragon scale had been quiet for 300 years. It should have stayed quiet. But the forest at the city's edge was dying, trees turning to gray dust at the roots, leaves curling into ash before they could fall, and Kaelen, who had spent 30 years studying the old records, knew what it meant. The scale was calling, and the Order, blinded by pride and fear, had chosen to blind themselves further. They had stripped him, exiled him, and sealed the gates of Veridain behind him with every lock and ward they possessed, as if locks could stop a dragon. The ash would stretch for 3 leagues beyond Veridain's outer wall, and it had not always been dead. The old record spoke of it as the Emerald Ring, a living wall of oak and ironwood, so thick that no arrow could pierce its canopy, so old that the first oath keepers had carved their vows into its bark. Now it was gray, every trunk, every branch, every root, gray as bone, brittle as dry paper. When Kaelen walked through it, his boots crunched on leaves that turned to powder at a touch. The air was silent, no birds, no insects, just the hollow sound of his own breath and the distant rhythmic thrum that he could feel in his teeth. The watchtower came into view through the skeletal trees. It had been a frontier post once, manned by a dozen spears who kept watch for raiders from the Grey Marches. Now its stones were half buried in ash strips, and its belfry, rusted iron bell still hanging, was occupied by something else. The wight did not attack. It simply stood at the bell pull, its translucent hands gripping the rope, and rang, once every 3 seconds. A slow, mournful toll that echoed through the dead forest like a question no one had answered. Kaelen approached carefully, his empty gauntlets raised. He had no sword, no sigil, no authority. He was a ghost in a dead wood, facing a ghost who still did its duty. "What are you ringing for?" he asked. The wight turned. Its face was a smear of blue light. No features, no eyes, but Kaelen felt the weight of its attention, and then impossibly it spoke in a voice like wind through cracked stone. "The oath is broken, the forest knows, the scale remembers. I ring until the vow is restored, or until the world forgets." It had been ringing for 300 years. Beneath the watchtower, Kaelen found the entrance to the catacombs of record, a labyrinth of corridors that had once connected every fortress in the Old Kingdom. The Order had sealed them off when the scale first stirred, fearing that knowledge itself could be a weapon. He descended through chambers stacked floor to ceiling with scrolls, histories of wars that had never been fought, genealogies of kings who had never lived, maps of cities that existed only in ink. The archivists of Veridain had been obsessive. They had recorded everything, no matter how trivial, as if preserving the weight of the world on paper could keep the world from ending. In the deepest chamber, Kaelen found the last of them. The skeleton sat at a reading table, its posture eerily preserved, spine curved. One arm extended, fingers resting on a map so old that the ink had begun to dissolve into the parchment. The candle beside it had melted into a perfect pool of wax, undisturbed for centuries. Kaelen leaned in. The map showed Veridain, but not the Veridain he knew. The streets were labeled in a script he did not recognize, and at the city's center, where the throne hall should have been, there was a single word, Draconheim, Dragonhome. The scale had not been buried beneath the city. The city had been built on top of it, every stone, every tower, every oath sworn in the throne hall. All of it was a cage constructed around a sleeping heart. And the map revealed something else. A passage drawn in a finer, more desperate hand, leading from the throne hall's vaults downward into chambers that no official record acknowledged. The archivist had discovered it, and when the Order sealed the catacombs, she had chosen to stay behind to guard the knowledge until someone came who needed it. Kaelen folded the map carefully, tucking it into his tunic. "I'll finish where you started," he said. The skeleton's jaw hung open in what might have been a smile, or might have been the simple weight of 3 centuries of silence. He could not tell. But as he turned to leave, the candle on the table, dry, ancient, impossible, flickered once and went out. The passage beneath Veridain was narrow, wet, and hot. The air thickened with every step until Kaelen could taste metal on his tongue, and the thrum that had haunted him since the forest resolved into a low, grinding vibration that shook the walls. The vault opened before him like the throat of a beast. It was vast, larger than the throne hall above, hewn from obsidian so black that it seemed to drink the light, and at its center, suspended above a cracked pedestal of black stone, floated the dragon scale. It was beautiful. Not in the way jewels are beautiful, or weapons, or crowns. It was beautiful the way a wildfire is beautiful, terrible and absolute, demanding your attention not as an invitation, but as a warning. Amber fire pulsed through its surface in slow, rhythmic waves, and with each pulse the air shimmered, and Kaelen felt his bones humming sympathy. The runes on the walls began to glow, one by one, in sequence, as if someone or something was reading them aloud, and then the dragon came. Not in the flesh, it was older than flesh, older than bone. It manifested as a column of amber light that rose from the scale and spread like wings of fire across the vault ceiling. Kaelen fell to his knees, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of its presence, pressing down on him like the ocean. It did not speak in words, it spoke in images burning directly into his mind. A young knight, 3 centuries past, kneeling before a great grey dragon in a forest of emerald green. An oath sworn in blood and iron. The forging of the scale sigil, a fragment of the dragon's own hide, wrought into metal by the first oathkeeper, and then a betrayal, a figure in the shadows of the throne hall, a knife drawn across the sigil's surface, the scale cracking, the forest screaming, the dragon's roar splitting the sky as it poured the last of its power into the fragment, imprisoning itself in its own scale, rather than let the traitor consume what it guarded. The images stopped. The dragon's voice, low, resonant, ancient, filled the chamber. The Sundered Vow was never broken by the Order. It was broken by one of its own, a thief in oath metal. He cracked my scale to steal what I guarded, the heart of the forest, the root memory of the world. He failed. But the crack remains, and every year the wound widens. Kaelen forced himself to look up. The dragon's form rippled in the amber light, wounded, furious, patient. I guard the scale now, he said. I have no sigil, no sword, but I am here. The dragon was silent for a long moment. Then, the scale on its pedestal shivered, a fragment no larger than a fingernail flaked off and drifted through the air, settling against Kaelen's chest plate and melting into it. The pain was instantaneous. White fire flooded his veins, and he screamed, not from agony, though there was plenty of that, but from the sheer immensity of what poured into him, the forest's memory. Every leaf that had fallen, every root that had grown, every creature that had lived and died in that emerald kingdom for 1,000 years, it filled him until he thought his bones would crack. The scale chose you, Kaelen of the Northern Garrison, or perhaps you chose it, when you chose to come here without weapon or title, with nothing but the truth that you were wrong. The world does not need perfect knights, it needs ones who keep walking, even when everything has been taken from them. Kaelen emerged from Veridain as the sun rose over the ashwood. The forest was still gray. It would remain gray for years, perhaps decades. The wound of the sundered scale had run too deep for a single morning to heal. But at the roots of the dead trees, where the ash lay thickest, something had changed. Green shoots, no thicker than a needle, pushed up through the powder. Kaelen touched the new sigil on his chest. It was warm, not hot, not painful, but alive. It pulsed in the same rhythm as the scale, and through it he could feel the forest breathing, slow, damaged, but breathing. He had no oath metal to show the world. No rank, no title, no witnesses to what he had done. The Order would never know, the kingdom would never know, but the dragon knew, the forest knew, and the scale resting now in its obsidian vault, guarded by the last oathkeeper, remembered. Kaelen turned his back on Veridain's gates and walked into the ashwood. The morning light fell through the skeletal branches, casting long shadows across the ash. And for the first time in 300 years, the dead wood was not silent. A bird sang somewhere in the distance, far beneath the city, in a vault of living obsidian. A dragon scale pulsed once, slow, patient, eternal, and in the chest of a broken knight who had become something more, the same pulse answered. The Sundered Vow was not restored, not fully, but a new vow had been made, and a new vigil had begun.